Welcome to another episode of the Cackle. This is where we meet with Midwest changemakers and connect the dots between economic trends and the lived experiences of people navigating them. I'm Emily Hines. I'm the founder and managing director of Entry Point. And at Entry Point, we partner with economic development organizations and nonprofits to foster inclusive and vibrant communities across the Midwest through research and community-focused programming. So if you want to see any of our research, we've got it all up free for all to see on entrypointmi.com. We're also launching, we also have a new report coming out in just a few weeks as soon as we can finish it. And that will be on the Ann Arbor entrepreneurial ecosystem. So you can check that out. And then if this is your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a repeat Cackler, we are glad to have you back. And today I'm super excited to welcome Ashley Woods Branch. She's the founder of Detour Detroit, which is an independent local source of equitable journalism and news about the community. They're like so great and you're so interesting. And I am so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. Like it is a totally crazy thing when a podcast you have actually listened to reaches out and is like, can you be a guest? Like, I was like, me? Sure.
You're like, I thought you were going to go the route of podcast that actually has someone who has no business hosting a podcast. I used to be in public.
Well, that's every podcast. But you're like, I've actually learned from you from watching you host these podcasts. I think you're a really, really great host. So like, I don't know. I'm just so excited to be here. This is a podcast I really like because I think the diversity of people you bring to the table is really cool. And I also think like, I would like to see more products and media that connect us in the Midwest, because I think like whether you're in Detroit, Lexington, Cincinnati, Minneapolis, like we have so much that connects us, like, and so much more in common, here, like in the, Midwest, West Coast, I just, like, I'm just thrilled to be here.
Yay. Yeah. I totally agree. It is kind of like all boats, high tide rises all boats, and like we all have a lot in common, so it's kind of like cool to bring everyone together. So give like a little bit, like I love what you guys do, so give like a little bit of background on Detour Detroit and the focus of your coverage, just to give people some context.
Sure. So here at Detour Detroit, we produce equitable local journalism and newsletters, and we have a dual focus of covering the city of Detroit for and by its residents, which I think makes a difference. I worked for a major newspaper before leaving to launch my own startup. And I always felt, as someone who had lived in Detroit for a long time, that a lot of times journalists were covering Detroit as this kind of like othering thing. And they were covering it for people who lived outside the city. So, really started with this like, important belief that like we should be writing community news by Detroiters about Detroiters. When we talk about, equity, that really comes into, we really focus on making sure that women and people of color are making up the majority of our, journalists and freelance writing staff. Their stories need to be told, and they have historically been ignored. So, amplifying those voices, connecting those writers with the training and the opportunities that they need to be able to tell those stories, and kind of, giving some light to communities that don't always have that opportunity. That's really important to us. And different than, I guess, just, a regular journalism or a legacy, journalism place. We really care about bringing the community together and helping the community. So, when COVID-19 hit, we started this, Keep Detroit Local program. And every time somebody signed up to be a member, we gave a free ad to a local business that was struggling. And we prioritized Black and brown businesses in Detroit who really needed help. We have raised money for the Detroit Justice Center. We spend a lot of time doing events and trainings in the community. So like we think that like local news, it's bigger than just writing stories. It's about helping people become engaged in their community and figure out a way to help. So that is really our mission. And we're trying to do that through, digital journalism, through really fun newsletters and, good storytelling, and interesting, social media that, focuses on these people who make our city so special.
Yeah, I would encourage people like even outside of the Detroit area to check it out and sign up for your newsletter because it's like kind of is a really like authentic news source. Like I really dislike when I'm like, you're like realize you're like in the machine when you're getting your news or like you're having these like kind of conversations where you're like, this isn't a real conversation. But like I think whenever I read you guys' piece, which is like always like I bet if you looked at my analytics, I have a very good opener of all of the news. And like I just feel like they are really like great like different things that are going on like across the spectrum of things that are happening in the community and like the voices you guys bring out are really authentic and the pieces are well written and everything. And so I'm like I feel like we wanted to have you on because I feel like it's just such a good you are like a serious press and journalist person who like is doing things uniquely and authentically. And so like it's good to get like the best practices from someone like you versus like I don't know, someone like that works for the machine. So
I appreciate that. I mean, I think, I was really excited, when when you invited me to this conversation, because we really, we see supporting independent local businesses in Detroit as like one of our main focuses, like whether that's through partnerships or events or just the storytelling that we're doing. Like
yeah.
we think that, Detroit and surrounding areas needs like wonderful, independent, local, businesses, nonprofits, cultural
Mhm.
institutions in order for this to be a thriving community. So like
Yeah.
I don't think that this is knowledge that you should have to pay somebody thousands of dollars a month in order to access. This should be things that everybody knows. And I hope, if
Yeah.
you're watching this today, we can give you some tips or ideas to try or places to look that can really help you with this because you don't need a lot of money or access or to be famous. And that's like the one thing I'm gonna say, like there are outlets like mine across the Midwest too. And that's the really important thing is, you can find these publishers in your community and hopefully we'll give you some tips that make it easier to share your story.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times that's like where you see actionable stuff where when you're pushing your name out there, it's to like customer base or people who are actually wanting to work with you as a small business versus like a lot of times if you're in like a really gigantic publication, it might get you like a lot of clicks and things like that. But then those people aren't actually then buying from you or working with you or hiring you or whatever. So give like a little example or like give a little overview of like how press works, like how do things happen, like go from like just happening or like to being covered in the press, like what does that process look like?
It is so like much like more informal than I think anybody realizes. So, I did start my career at like the tail end of, I guess, traditional journalism back when, print was still a really big thing. And, we got, I was, my first job was at an alt weekly. And I was the managing editor and, we would get all the, yeah, like an alternative weekly, like the Metro Times here in Detroit is an example of one,
Oh,
right? So this one is defunct now, but that's where I started, one of those like cultural entertainment free newspapers.
okay.
And we would get, all of these like press releases and there'd be pitch days. Like it was a very, very formal thing because it was really before social media was accessible and available to businesses. I mean, now, it's a free for all, right? Like,
Yeah.
like sometimes journalists, we just literally see or hear things through our networks, and that gives us an idea for a story. Sometimes, a lot of people still send press releases. We'll talk more about how to do that the right way. I think that something that's really, smart that I've seen, only a few, people try to do, but I think it's great is, building authentic relationships with journalists and really only leveraging that when you have a story that really, really fits with that exact publication and with that niche, which I think is still the greatest way to get a story. But a lot of times, journalists we are reacting to what we're seeing in real time on social media or in real life, and kind of bringing those stories back to the newsroom versus the very, the more traditional top-down way of, we have 7 press releases today, which one are we going to pick to cover? So that has been, I think, the biggest change. At Detour Detroit, we don't do a lot of, we really rely on our, team of, reporters and writers to bring those stories for us, to us, because that I do think that top-down kind of method of journalism used to be, a place where white men made the decisions of what was going to be covered. So, I do think it's really important. We try to push our writers and reporters as much as possible to bring stories to us, because they're in the community, they're talking to people, they have a better sense of what needs to be covered. So I think you are starting to see more of that. But yeah, the landscape has really, really changed, Emily.
Yeah. So then it would be like, so now you feel like it's kind of more like if business owners are making relationships with a journalist or a few different journalists at publications, that they're like this, they cover news kind of like ours, or things like our business, things similar to our business, then they take it, the journalist takes it to like the editor in the newsroom. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
You can tell I
So
don't actually know how the news works. I'm like,
yeah, it's complicated. I mean, one thing I will say is, on any given day, because staffing at every publication, whether it's digital, print, broadcast, TV, or whatever, staffing is so low compared to what it was 10 or 15 years ago, that there are never enough people to write all the stories that need to be told. There just are not. So
Yeah.
that is, I think, it is one of the things I dislike most about journalism, is that I see, or I get a lot of emails or messages about stories that we just literally do not have the bandwidth to cover. But when I think, when I see people pitching successfully who are local business owners, I see them as, they're very focused. So they say, oh, this publication in my community really, it focuses on telling the stories of, food and immigrants and culture. So because I'm doing, this great event, and I'm having people from this neighborhood in, and we're going to be celebrating this holiday or whatever, this is a really good focused pitch, and I'm going to reach out. Even better if you have built a relationship before. There's a lot of small business owners here in Detroit that I just know, because we are part of the community. They started those relationships with me years ago. They invited me to the grand opening. They sent me a message about a new program that they were doing. We saw each other, at the grocery store and said hi. We've built a relationship together. And then when they have a story that is right for Detour Detroit, I am more likely to take a look at it and listen and really think about it, because I know that they read our publication, and usually they're suggesting something that is right on point. So that's, I think, a really something for, local business owners. If you are looking for media coverage, actually read the media that you are pitching, and get a sense of, where your story would make sense. One of the smartest pitches I've ever seen is a business owner wrote in and said, hey, I am doing this program. It would be a really great fit for this newsletter that you publish about culture on Wednesdays. I noticed you feature a lot of women opening businesses, and I am opening a business. Would you like to have me? That was really smart. She did half of the work for me, right? She read my publication. She understood, where she would fit in. She gave me enough lead time. She didn't email me the day before, which is another thing that people do a lot. So it was really easy to work with her. So, becoming familiar with the journalists in your community, the publications that might be a good fit, and being proactive and kind of just building those relationships without expecting something the first time, that I think is really, really crucial, to being able to share your story.
Yeah, so identifying kind of those journalists that cover your kind of stuff, and just going out for coffee even before you have the news or something. I was surprised. I used to work with this woman named Amber Pineda, and she was the first intro I ever had to the PR world, and she had come from an agency and all this stuff. And then I was yeah, how do we get more press? And she was well, you just get coffee and build a relationship with the reporters. And I was wait wait, they'll want to have coffee? That's bananas. Like, what? And then it's so true. Like, people are like, oh yeah, I would rather like kind of get to know people that are in this community and get a sense for like what their stuff is. So I was like, yeah, I like that.
Too, it's a mutual relationship. So that's the other thing I would say, like, especially if you're watching this and you're someone who maybe is, a little interested in PR marketing, or you're a small business owner, is, so there's this public relations guy in the Detroit community named Matt Friedman, former journalist. He's a master. Matt, if you're watching, I'm shouting you out because you are so great at this. Matt understands the relationship building. Look, we're legitimate friends. He has legitimate friends that are journalists, but he also understands like the give and the take. If there's a point where there's a breaking news situation and Matt represents a client that would be really great for me to quote, he is smart enough to know that we are probably working on that story and will like push himself forward and say, hey, are you writing a story about blank? Because you really need to talk to this person and I can set it up for you immediately. Yeah. Right. Sometimes he like just suggests sources that I should talk to. He's a helpful resource to me who has helped me. And so when Matt says that he has a story that we should take a look at, I take him seriously. Right. Yeah. Like I trust his knowledge. So if I'm a small business owner and I'm reading this, the way that I would use that to connect is, small business stories are, small business owners and small business stories, like your struggles and your successes are part of a lot of other stories that are happening in the media. So building those relationships, with journalists and also being willing, maybe you have an opinion on the new tax that the mayor is having, maybe, letting a journalist know, I live in this neighborhood. So if you ever need a source or a quote, from North Rosedale Park, please call me and I can help you. It's things like that. Like when you can become a resource to a journalist, then they will come to you when they have a story idea, when they're looking for a source, when they need a quote because they've already got two, but they just need one more. Like you can become that trusted call. So, building that relationship with a journalist, letting them know what you're about, what you're passionate about, more about your identity, and then being willing and able to kind of seize those opportunities. That's what leads to long-term press relationships that really pay off.
Yeah. So it's like, I feel like we're entering this kind of like weird phase where like the pandemic sort of subsiding, might come back. Who knows? Like everybody's still in this like middle portion of time where they're like not really sure, like, do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? Like, are we comfortable? Are we not comfortable? Some people are, some people aren't. Like, and so I feel like that kind of has like it impacted like how businesses are thinking about like marketing their companies and like what works and what doesn't work. And are we still like doing podcasts and like Facebook ads, or are we doing more like press and TV or whatever? Like, do you think small businesses could be kind of like better utilizing the press to get their names out there and to like reach customers? Or do you feel like it's kind of maybe not the best strategy for a small business owner at this time? Or how would you kind of, or is there like a particular thing that you think that small business owners should be thinking of communicating? Like, what are your thoughts on all of the?
I have lots of thoughts.
Perfect.
So in coming out of the pandemic, this is such a weird time. I absolutely think that all small businesses need to be focusing on a, weekly to monthly basis on how do I tell my story, share what I am passionate about, and really build a relationship with a likely customer. And to me, that advertising should be really focused. I don't think that a typical display ad in a newspaper or a banner on a website does that for you. The kind of things that work, whether you're paying for them or not. So for example, at Detour Detroit, a lot of the advertising that we do with our partners is social media based. So for example, we might have a small business owner on for Instagram Q&A and kind of like a behind the scenes look at that business. So they'll do an Instagram takeover of our handle for the day. They'll answer questions for our audience. We'll promote it in all of our newsletters and online. And even though you might be reaching a smaller total number of users than like a banner ad or just a typical Facebook ad, you are getting the chance to take a reader behind the scenes, to let them know why you are the best at what you do, to share your passion. And you have the ability to make them a brand ambassador. And to me, like if 500 people walk away after having seen that on social media and like actually have a sense of who you are and what your story is and what value you bring to the community, that is worth so much more than just like someone seeing your logo somewhere. Right. And I think that for business owners, they have to really, really get real about what is actually going to move the needle in their business. Like we make as customers, I believe that we make purchasing decisions, based on emotion. The majority of the time, if I know here in Detroit that I can support a small business and I know their story and I know what they bring to the community, I will do that. But if I don't know that they exist and I don't have an affinity for them or a relationship or a reason to care, like I can just go to Target and get it. So that's where I think small business owners really, really need to get in front of that, how easy it is to order things on Target and Amazon and things like that by making their story part and parcel to everything that they do. Like you should be really, really clear on what your brand is, what your story is, what value you bring. And if you're not, this goes for literally any business owner, right? It goes for me too. Like if you can't tell somebody in 10 or 15 seconds what you do and what you bring to the community, you have more work to do. And then I think looking for opportunities, whether that's, partnering events, whether that's, earned media, what we were talking about, getting someone to write about you, promoted social media engagements. I would say like really spend the time on things that are going to share your story with people who are very likely to become your customers. Like it just, otherwise you're just wasting your time. I think that's my personal opinion. Your mileage may vary.
Getting famous and not getting rich. You can reach a lot of people and they'll all know you, but then no one will buy anything. So sad.
Yeah, I mean, it is true though. Like I see some, small businesses, they might spend a lot of money on, for example, on social media ads, but they're targeting everybody, and everybody is not your customer. I mean, Emily, we know this, like as business owners, that is just a truism of business. Everyone is not your customer. So really understanding your niches, like who you are serving and why and what value you bring to them, then I think you can spend more time and more energy crafting a really personalized pitch to those people who are most likely to become your customers.
Yeah. I might just forget everybody else because they're not gonna
forget them
in the future anyway. They're all forgotten. Is there sort of like any best practices you could share for like how small businesses could get covered in the press? So like, like press releases, like you said, building relationships, but like how do people go about like doing press releases and like that kind of thing?
So first off, I think events, whether they're virtual or IRL, I think events are a great way to get coverage and introduce your business to the community. And if you were doing an event, partner, because 2 or 3 organizations spreading the word on you, like all of a sudden that event looks bigger. There's more people behind it. Like it's, and then like publications go, oh, maybe we should send somebody there because it's, being hosted by this business, but then it's partnering with this nonprofit and they're donating some of the donations to this charity. This seems like a pretty big deal. Like maybe this is something that we should include in our newsletter. I think partnering is something that it comes for free, and the value it can bring to your, events and businesses, it is really, really, important. I think figuring out I think of the most successful entrepreneurs in terms of earned media in Detroit, they bake the community into everything that they do. Whether that is a new initiative, a new product, a new event, they are always figuring out how to give back to the community and how to make the community part of their story. And then when you have more people rooting for you, supporting you, showing up to your event because you are part of the community, more people are going to write about you. So that is something I would say too, is I think really successful business owners who get earned media, they do it because they build connections and partnerships with other allies in the community, and they do things together. It doesn't have to be just that. So I think a great example of this is Batch Brewing in Detroit, who does their neighborhood taps where they give the money back to charity. They do tons of events that are community focused. They took stances in favors of protections for workers during COVID-19. There's a lot of media about this tiny little brewery in Detroit, but I think it's because they're always thinking about the community and how to properly represent, work with that community, support that community.
Yeah.
It become a feel-good story that other people want to, promote. Another great one is April Anderson at Good Cakes and Bakes, right?
Who just on the Cackle, yay!
Yeah, she's amazing, right? But she is involved in so much in the community. She's a leader, so she leads. So that is, don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and look around and say, how can I help? How can I partner? I think really, really successful entrepreneurs who get a lot of earned media understand. Rachel Lutz at the Peacock Room in Detroit is another one, who understand that they can, by partnering, by figuring out how to help others, they can use their business as a source of good and action and inspiration. And that really helps lead, to, I think, great coverage. All those people also do really cool events. So again, small events that you broadcast live can be great in the time of COVID too, or virtual events. So that's one really big piece of advice, I think, is to, if you can figure out how you can support the community and you can do it alongside other people instead of making it all about you, I think you have a really, really great chance of being covered and also of doing good, which matters too. I also think, I think it's great when I see, the Cackle is a great example of this. Also in Detroit, K9to5 does a social media series called Woman Owned Wednesdays, where they feature a different woman in the community who owns a business, every week. It is so smart to do that. It is because I learned so much about your values as a business by how you choose to represent yourself in your own forms of media. So whether that's blog posts, Instagram Q&As, podcasts, figure out what is authentic to you and your brand. But I think that is a really, really great piece of advice for any entrepreneur. Because when you have a perspective and a voice and you are part of something larger than yourself, you will be written about. And those are the best ways, I think, to get noticed without, paying for really fancy public relations help.
Yeah, I feel like K9to5 does do such a good job. Why am I blanking on her name?
Liz Blondie.
Yes, Liz.
Yeah,
oh my God. She's
so
going to murder me now. Because I just was like, why can't I remember her name? That's so silly. Liz is so good at doing things really authentically too. I feel like a lot of times, even when she's posting in Facebook groups and stuff, it's talking about things about her businesses or struggles, it doesn't come off as being salesy. It comes off as just her authentically expressing herself and talking about her business and stuff. And you're just that resonates with people so much, I think.
Because it is her. It is truly authentic. I agree. I think she is just so smart. And I have learned she's also so generous with her advice and her expertise that she's developed. And I do think that is true too. When you become someone in your community as an entrepreneur who gives back to other business owners, who gives back to other people in the community or whatever, you develop a relationship of goodwill and generosity. And I really believe that pays off. People will write about you. People will lift that up because that matters so much, and we need more of that. Sometimes you do have to do good for a little while before people can see it. It's like they say in yoga, right? Like sometimes you have to hold the pose, even when it's hard, even when there's sweat dripping down your face. But it really is, I really think that is beneficial. One other thing I would say, just as a practical one, first off, when you are doing two things for entrepreneurs, telling your story of your business on social media and having images is really great. One thing that is just true about media, and so sad because I have tons of friends who are professional photographers, but it's very hard for us when we're trying to write something quickly and we don't have images. So if you have images and you are pitching or sending something to a journalist, and having images is like, oh, that really helps. So documenting your own, successes and struggles and things like that visually can be a big help to a business if you're looking to get, written about for the first time. The second is that, talking to a media outlet, like I said, for independent local organizations like ours, you can do advertising with us beginning at $100, $200. I mean, there are really affordable ways to get your message out to people who are really, really, targeted. People who really care about Detroit and read Detour newsletters want to shop local, right? So they're kind of your ideal audience. A lot of, most news outlets also put on events, and they're looking for people to sponsor or partner at really, really affordable rates too. So you can access, their audiences usually for a very, very reasonable rate. And then you've built a relationship with that publication by being their supporter, and it's never going to hurt. So thinking of, if you're a local business owner and there's a local publication near you that you would like to be written about someday, it doesn't always hurt to build some sort of relationship with them, even if it's very low budget. It will probably pay off for you in major ways. The ROI of working with a targeted local publication will beat out anything you ever do with one of these, huge newspapers or dailies or something like that. But also it builds that relationship. You become one of their partners. That never hurts either. So being strategic about that, I think
even the name recognition of so when you have news, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's that person or that organization. Yeah, I was going to touch on that. What do you think are some ways that because I feel like a lot of times new businesses, particularly after the pandemic craziness has been going on, people don't have a ton of budget to allocate to marketing and PR and all of the things. So what do you feel are some cost-effective ways? I mean, you touched on a few, but what do you feel are cost-effective ways that people can go about spreading the word about their business?
Yeah. I think this is really important. And I would say when you have a limited amount of budget, really, really make it count. To me, the things that provide the best ROI are, focused experiences, whether that's partnering on an event or something like an Instagram takeover or a Facebook Live or a podcast. I think those really, really pay off. We run newsletter ads that are very different than other publications. We don't do displays or banner. Instead, there's 200 words where a business can share their story and talk about who they are. I would say whether it's with a place like Detour Detroit or elsewhere, look for advertising opportunities that allow you to talk about who you are and why you matter to a very focused group. It doesn't have to be a large audience because we are talking conversion and the funnel here, right? So
that is really interesting.
I think that's, I also really like things too. We do a lot of giveaways or, partnering on events where we share emails. And I think when you're a business and you're just starting out, moving people down that funnel from I've never heard of you before awareness to consideration, where maybe they're following your Instagram or you have their email and you can message them or whatever. figuring out ways to get to that second place in the funnel, that consideration, I think is really, really important. And rather than spending a ton of money on awareness and probably targeting people who are not your ideal customer, focus on a smaller pool of that, of those ideal customers, and try to get their emails, try to get them to take a survey, try to get them to like your Instagram, try and get them to show up to a demonstration on Facebook Live or whatever. Like, figure out a way to get them to do something, and the chance of them becoming your customer is much higher. But a lot of times I feel like I see local businesses focus too much on that top of the funnel. And I think when you don't have a lot of money, for me, and I do this with Detour too, right? Because we are member run and member supported. So our, small amount of marketing dollars, we focus on moving people who are likely to support Detour down the funnel, by convincing them of our value and our worth that we bring to their lives, and what becoming a member will do for them. So I live this struggle every day myself, and I would say, it's that to me is, but like, you have to be really ruthless, and honest with yourself. Am I doing this? Am I gonna? This Facebook ad says that it's going to show it to 10,000 people. How many of them are actually likely to buy something from me? And when you get really honest about that, then I think it starts to become more clear.
Yeah. I like the, what is the hair club for men saying? I bring this up on the Cackle like every 10th episode of like I'm not only a customer, I'm not only the owner, I'm also a customer. Like, I feel like I regularly talk about that, because whenever we're interviewing small business owners, I'm like, I know, because I'm not only the owner, I'm also a small business owner, but yeah, anyway.
I know. We all do it over and over again. My example now is that like Roman, for men, who are having issues with performance, and the guy who founded Roman has done like a series of like, his commercials are like basically him in a chair talking about his like performance issues with his girlfriend and why he started the startup. They're so compelling. Like, I can't take my eyes away. So that's my example.
Watch that. That's really interesting.
They're amazing.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that is the photos thing. I wanted to touch on that again too, because we run into that so much as well. Like, in our research, a lot of times we're profiling different companies that like highlight specific trends we're talking about, so people can like digest the data a little bit better. And we'll like regularly be reaching out to small business owners saying like, can you send us like a high resolution shot of you like in action, or like a photo of you that we can use or something? And people just like don't have, and it is particularly when we're doing something in a lower income region, I find like then people just don't have like cameras, or they wouldn't have hired like a photographer to come to something, or like even the phone camera that they have isn't like the newest model of phone or something like that. And so, but yeah, it is just like, then I'm like, oh, we need that photo. Like, how do we get that? And like, I'll be scouring the Facebook pages, and oh my gosh, it's
really it's a thing. Something I can say is, if you're like, I cannot afford professional photographer, first off, I would say like, if you can save up the money and try and at least get a headshot, a picture of your business, a picture of your team, it would be super valuable. If you're really struggling, just starting off, and you feel like you don't have, the money for that, you could start off by, maybe you can look for someone who's a photography student at a university, or, someone in your community, who's just learning or just kind of starting out. You've got to pay everybody something, but there's affordability, up and down the line. But you need,
even like a high schooler who has if you know a high schooler who has an iPhone, like they're like magicians, these people.
Absolutely.
Like, and so then it's just like, yeah, if you even know like a cousin that has an iPhone that can just snap a photo and like email it to you right quick, so you have it for the future. Like, I feel like that's so helpful in getting like featured, even in like, I mean, ours isn't like press, but like in some way is like getting your name out there, and like having those like really good photos, like people just, it resonates with people so much when they're
Yeah.
like reading something and then they have this like great photo of the business owner who's
Yeah.
like,
I would also say this too, and I want to say this gently because as a small business owner, I know that it is hard, but when you can be easy to work with and responsive with a journalist, we file that away and say, this is a person I can contact if I need something quickly, if I'm looking for a quote, if there's a breaking news story in the neighborhood they live in, whatever. But I will say this, like, you cannot believe how many times I have wanted to work with a small business owner and they don't provide a number where I can call them, don't answer their emails, ghost me, like things like that. And it's hard. I know that you're running a business too, but when those opportunities come up, really try and make the most of them. And if you can't, just say that up front, because it's better. If I contacted you for a story and you said, hey, Ashley, I'm dealing with kind of like a mental health crisis. This is not a good time with me. I'm totally open the next time you contact me, but it's not going to work this time. That's fine. I'm not going to think any less of you. I'll still call you. But if I email you and I call you and I'm trying to get you for a story and you don't respond to me, I am going to assume you don't want to talk to journalists, and I'm not gonna try again, likely the next time that something comes up. So like
yeah,
prioritize those. It's really important for business owners to prioritize that communication in their workflow and to make yourself accessible to journalists, because you cannot believe the amount of times that we have wanted to cover or include a quote from a small business, and either they provide no way to contact them, they don't have any contact information on the internet, or they don't answer calls, voicemails, emails. And those are wasted opportunities, and those, then it's kind of a bridge that's burned. So like, just being responsive and honest, whether you can or can't, it goes such a long way.
yeah, that is a good point. And it's like, even if it's not like, I don't know, like sometimes like if it's an easy way to get your name out there, then it's like, that's a valuable thing versus like, if it's not, I don't know, like not like pitching press, if it's not like your specific target and like a press source is like coming to you as a business owner, like it kind of just doesn't hurt to like be like, yeah, like I'll give a quote, sure, like put it in there, get my name out there a little bit.
Yeah.
um
I mean, one more I know what not to do too. I mean, just because we're here, I do receive a lot of press releases from businesses where it's very clear they have never read my publication. They don't know what we cover. They are not a great fit for what they are pitching. And it doesn't, and then sometimes like they'll call me repeatedly about it, or like email me over and over again or whatever. And I sometimes want to say to them, I don't have time, but I want to say, like, I wish you would spend your time, like focusing on pitches that are actually valuable and work out. I think there used to be this like PR idea, I think, of just kind of almost like, well, send it to everybody and maybe somebody will pick it up. And if
yeah,
there's anything anyone can take away from this conversation, it's don't do that. Be
yeah,
focused and deliberate. If I get 4 emails from you a month about stuff that we would never cover because it's not one of the topics we write about, it's not in our geographic area, it wouldn't appeal to our readers, like, you might send a good one 3 months down the road, but like, I have already been ignoring your emails because they are not helpful and targeted and focused. So like, really, like, don't do that. Like, just wait for those moments, build those relationships, and then when you have something that's a good fit, like, be like, hey, I think this would make so much sense. Here's why. Chances are I'm going to agree.
yeah,
So, but like, don't waste your shot on stuff that's like not going to be, a real
yeah,
story.
not at all. Yeah, that's a good point. So what is on the horizon for you, Detour Detroit, all the things?
Um, Gosh, there's a lot. So, Detour, we started as a independent local publication. And when COVID hit, we lost almost 100% of our advertising revenue overnight. It was a really scary time. And we kind of looked inward and said, what are we great at it? And what can we do to survive this moment in the pandemic? And we realized that, we had we had developed a lot of skills in digital strategy, membership generation, newsletters, things like that, that could be of use to other people kind of in our world. So we've started partnering with other local news organizations to help them produce their newsletters, help them grow their audiences, help them to convert to members. And that has been one of the most rewarding things that I have ever done as a business owner. Like, it is amazing to say, like, we are not working against each other. We are working with each other. And I'm going to help you grow, and that's going to help us too. So that was a really, really cool thing to have come out of the pandemic. And I'm very proud. It's now the second largest revenue stream that we have, is kind of doing these studio and creative services. We started with a lot of independent local publications in the Michigan area, like Black Detroit Magazine, Flint Beat up in Flint, Michigan, Outlier, does a lot of SMS, texting with residents here in Detroit. And we're looking to expand to maybe help other mission-driven organizations who aren't news outlets, but who also need to communicate with their, users or clients. So that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. That was good thinking. Good moving and shaking there.
Emily, I mean, when the pandemic hit, my husband's an entrepreneur too. His business was shut down. We lost all our revenue. I got a kid and a 2-month-old baby in my arms at that point. Like, we are sitting in the basement and we're like, so if we try and sell this house, file for bankruptcy, and move into our parents' house, like, maybe in 7 years it'll be okay. Like, so it came out of a place of total desperation, right? But
how long do you feel like that really dark period lasted? I always ask, like, people, fellow business owners, this. How long do you feel like you were in that really bad dark space?
I want to say it was 4 months. My husband's company ended up being acquired, which was really a gift from God at that moment. And we built our way out. But it was very, just speaking real, like, dealing with the pandemic, and then being a mom to a really colicky baby having trouble and going through postpartum depression. Like, I wouldn't have wished those months on anybody. But
I definitely feel like it was like, I think, like, it's not like we're out of that dark period. And I feel like in some ways, like, this new period is like it's new thing, and like everyone's changing what they're doing, and it's like another trial and tribulation. But I definitely think the first like 6 to 8 weeks of the pandemic, I was like losing my damn mind. I was like, what do we do? What do we do? So that's good thinking that you guys kind of like, that was good, like, angling, man. Ooh.
I think, like, and I actually now I take a lot of confidence and security about, from that moment, because, like, I've literally had, I feel like, the worst case scenario happen. And it isn't like, oh, wow, I was so smart and I figured this out. It was like, we tried different things until we found something that worked, but our backs were against the wall. So we had no option other to try and to fail and to continue to learn from that until we could build ourselves out. And, for any entrepreneur, watching this, I spent the first probably 2 years of running Detour being terrified of making mistakes, terrified of failing. I beat myself up every time we did something where I thought it wasn't good enough. And even though the pandemic was by far the most terrifying moment of my life, when you consider everything that was happening with our family and our businesses at that moment, it also took away that fear for me, where I just realized, like, this crazy journey that we are on is about trying stuff, figuring out if it works, adjusting if it doesn't, and keeping going. And if you can do that, you will always be okay in it. I no longer am worried about whether I am succeeding or I'm failing. I am an entrepreneur. I will always be one, whether I have a business or I'm not. And because I think it is a mindset and a way of being. And if you can accept that, then you don't have to be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you don't have to walk around with that, like, fear or that shame or of things not being good enough or whatever. It just seems simpler.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also feel like, this is off topic, but I also feel like a lot of small business owners right now are like very tired of pushing the rock up the hill kind of thing. And so I do worry that when we're kind of entering this still uncertain phase and like people are not acting like they did prior to the pandemic, but they're not acting like they did right when the pandemic hit either. So it's like this in between period of time, and like people are really tired of like this constant navigation kind of thing. And so a lot of business owners that I'm talking to are like really just like, I'm exhausted, when will this be done? And so it's like kind of, that's why I'm like, everyone needs to keep like shopping local. Just because you feel like the pandemic is subsiding and things are like opening up again, like does not mean like, oh, everyone's just healed, like we're done with all this. Like it's going to
Wow.
be like another good 2
Years.
years before people
Yeah.
are able to like recover from everything.
I
And that's
also
why we're
think
talking about the pandemic. That's not all the other things.
that's
All
not
these
even another
little things. Like what else can happen?
time.
My gosh.
Right. At Detour, we shut down some weeks this year for just kind of like mental health weeks. And before the pandemic, we were like, oh, so afraid if we don't send a newsletter, we're going to lose all our,
Yeah, that is
members or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah, and I think this is true for like every small business. Like, if you can afford to in any small way to step back and take a break and close, like, I can promise you, I will be there for you. I will not take it personally. I will support you doing that. I will come back. But like, we all need time. I just think like, I don't know. Like, I wish we could have a national, like half of America got to take a vacation for 1 month, and then the other half gets to go the next month or something like that. But it's like I feel like we just need time to rest, and we haven't
Yeah.
had that. It's
Yeah, that
crazy.
is true. It's like, oh, yeah. That's why I'm kind of like, I feel like we're not done with this yet. And people have got to keep on keeping on and like
We've
supporting
got to.
businesses and, doing what they can do. So I like how I just ended this on like a downer note. I'm like, oh, and then it's hard life. But tell people, we'll raise it up again. So tell people where they can go to read, sign up, all the things for Detour Detroit.
Sure. Yes. You should sign up for Detour Detroit. It will be news that you will be happy to read. You will learn about awesome people in your community and how to support them. And, it will not, like a lot of news, it will not make you feel bad when you open an email, which I think like is a great place to start. So you can go to detourdetroiter.com and sign up for our emails. You can find us at Detour Detroit on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all those places.
Yeah.
And you can become a member. We have more than 500 paid members now,
Yeah.
who support our work. And hey, business owners, when you become a Detour Detroit member, you get invited to our members only events where you get to hang out and meet the journalists and talk to them about stories you want to cover. This is legit. Become a member of a news organization if you want them to cover you. Like, it doesn't hurt, right? Like, build those relationships. That's a really, really easy way to do that. But also,
Yeah.
if you're a small business owner, take a look at some of the partnerships that we've done with local businesses, because they might spark a little inspiration for you of things that maybe you can try in your own channels with your own communities. And most of all, if you're watching this, like, thank you. Thank you for continuing to do what you do, for your communities. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for, following the Cackle and Emily. And Emily, thank you for producing this podcast. I mean, when I say it, like, it was a
Yay.
huge honor to be invited onto this. And
Cool.
it's great. You're doing something really cool here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we like it. We like it. It was also, I'm an extreme extrovert, so getting to talk to people during the pandemic is always fun.
Really, I love
Yay.
it.
So for everyone, we are continuing our special edition of the Cackle next Monday, and we'll have 3 new businesses on that. And applications for that, we'll put it in the comments, but applications for that are still open. So if you're a small business and you're watching this and you're kind of like want to be featured on that and find out more information about how to get on the Cackle, you can, the application link, and we'll put more information in the comments. And then And then next Wednesday, we're back here with our regular episode as well. And I'm like blanking on who we're featuring. Wait, let me look at my calendar real quick. All professional like. We don't take ourselves very too seriously. Oh, Nevin Goyle with Loud Capital is on, and they're a really great Midwest venture firm. So that'll be really interesting.
Cool.
And then yay. And so thank you everyone for joining. And thank you, Ashley. I was so excited.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was wonderful. Bye.
Bye.